not to allow yourself to be a victim. This is the way I try to live my life, not to allow those events of the past to make me into a victim. I want to win over and help others to win over. Life can be cruel, but we must not submit. Try to take a positive attitude. I am a survivor.
So you were born in Hungary and you are a survivor of the Shoah.
Yes.
Can you tell me your story?
Oh, well, how long have you got? I told my story in 70 seconds, in 5 days, and everything in between. I was 11 when I was deported from Hungary, but it was almost at the end of the war. Hungary went to war on Hitler's side, and the Hungarian Holocaust is different from what happened to the rest of Europe. Hungarian Jews were in every way disadvantaged. The first law against Hungarian Jews emerged in 1920, before anything else had happened. But and then when Hungary went to war, as I say, on Hitler's side, then the young men, the young Jews, were taken to the army, and almost everyone was killed. All members of my family, with one exception, were killed. This was the men. But the women and children and the old men stayed behind. Their rights were taken away, their right to work, their right to entertainment, their means of transport, their bicycles, their cars, their businesses were all taken away. But they were not systematically murdered. They were not taken into ghettos and concentration camps until 1944, when the war was almost over. And then the German army occupied Hungary, it was an allied country, and then there was a law within weeks for Jews to wear the yellow star. Within weeks, ghettos were formed, and then concentration camp and death started. And in 56 days, nearly 500,000 Hungarian Jews were taken to Auschwitz. And by then, the Auschwitz selection process almost didn't work, because Auschwitz previously had been a work and death camp. By then the war was being lost, the work element was no longer interesting for the Germans, so nearly all these Jews who were deported to Auschwitz were murdered immediately. So if you went to Auschwitz, you will have seen the long ramp that was built especially for the Hungarians, and over half of the victims of Auschwitz come from the small country of Hungary, and they were all killed in the summer of 1944. Now, the only Hungarian Jews who remained alive were the Jews of Budapest, because this cleansing process of getting rid of the provincial Jews finished at the beginning of July, and the Budapest story had only started then. And they didn't have the time, circumstances were changing, so about half of Budapest's Jews remained. If you meet a Hungarian Jew, most likely she comes from Budapest.
You too?
I am from Debrecen, and I am one of 15,000 who were from the provinces, not taken to Auschwitz, but instead to the vicinity of Vienna, and we were used as slave laborers, but we were not systematically murdered. A lot of people died of starvation, of various circumstances, but a large proportion, about 60 or so percent of the 15,000 provincial Jews remained alive, and I am one of those.
How did you survive?
Well, there are two questions. Why were 15,000 saved instead of being taken to Auschwitz with the rest? And the answer to this is that the Germans were negotiating with the British to exchange Jews for lorries. For lorries. And the currency, the exchange rate, was 300 Jews for a lorry. These negotiations were being conducted along while the war was raging, but they didn't come to a conclusion. In the meantime, 15,000 Jews were kept aside in case the exchange will happen. And I was one of these exchange Jews together with my family. I was 11 years old, as I say, when this happened. But while we were waiting, and we didn't know what was going on, we just knew we were there. And while we were there, we were used as slave laborers. And we lied at my suggestion that I was 14 years old enough to work, because only those who worked were given any food. Little children and old people in my family who couldn't work because either they were too young or too old. So, to earn another portion of food for the family, we lied that I was 14 and I worked with the adults as a slave laborer. So this is how I survived. Ours was an unusual train. Our train was traveling towards Auschwitz, and the last moment it was diverted to Vienna instead. And here I am to tell you the story.
And what do you think now about the war in Ukraine? Is it true that never again?
Well, the hope was that these kinds of genocides will not continue, but unfortunately history shows that they do. The Ukrainian event is not unique. There were events of a dreadful nature before. This is the most recent, and this is the nearest to us Europeans. But look what happened in Syria, look what happened in Rwanda, what happened in the Balkans in the 20th century. These were instances of people creating pain and suffering for each other.
Why is it important for you to go to the March of the Living?
There is the immediate reply that people should know what had happened. This is a way of making sure that history is not forgotten, but this is not enough. People should not just remember the Holocaust, but should learn from it. What is very important is that young people should participate in the Holocaust, look, watch, observe, and ask themselves how could they behave differently from the way our generation had behaved. So
what do you do with all this pain?
Pardon?
What do you do with all this pain, with all this injustice that has been?
It's very difficult not to feel despair that this is going on as it does. But I try to stay positive. I try not to allow myself to be dragged into despair because this had happened. And how do I keep positive? By talking to young people, learning from their questions, teaching them about what happened, and learning myself. Every time I come, this is the third time I'm here in Auschwitz, every time I come, I discover new and new elements, new and new ways in which you can look at what had taken place. And you could derive from these lessons for the future. And I discuss with young people what lessons we could learn, what lessons they could learn for the future. I learn with them while I am teaching.